Welcome to you all to this webinar by WRI India on electrification of road-based freight segment in India. Today, we are delighted to have you all on the launch of the Freight Total Cost of Ownership, the TCO Evaluator. And we will be sharing some findings from the TCO Evaluator, comparing the cost of ownership between different ICE and electric commercial vehicles. We'll be having two panel discussions. First one on light commercial vehicle segment, and the second one on medium and heavy commercial segments. During the panel discussion, we have eminent experts from the industry and the policy making space. We discuss techno-economic feasibility of EVs in urban freight segment through the prism of current policy and regulatory landscape in India. And we'll also be shedding light on incorporating innovations in business models and financing of electric freight vehicles. So with that, I hand over to Pawan. Pawan Mulukutla, Director of Urban Electric Mobility with WRI India, who will be giving the opening remarks. Over to you.
Thank you, Aparna, and good afternoon, everyone, and good afternoon, all the speakers. A warm welcome to you, all of you. I think it's indeed a good timing that we are talking about electrification of freight sector in India. And today's session obviously will focus both on the intra-city, the light segment, and also on the interstate, intercity segment also, which is kind of eventually where India will get to. And we also see that globally, WRI is part of the Drive Electric campaign as well, where we are also talking about accelerating the adoption of EVs, not just in the passenger segment alone, but also in the commercial segment. And I also will take this opportunity to welcome all the attendees. And just to let you know, we are also going live on Facebook and YouTube with this session. And please post your questions to the panelists and attendees in the chat window if you have anyone. With that, I welcome you all, and I would say let's move on with the launch of TCO and then get to the panel discussion where we would really hear interesting discussions and viewpoints from various speakers. Thank you, everyone. Welcome.
Thank you, Pawan. So with that, I would request Rohan Rao, Manager with Electric Mobility in WRI, to provide us a brief background on the analysis that WRI is doing.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Aparna. Thank you, Pawan, for the opening remark, and thank you, Aparna. So with regard to this session, I just will take 5 minutes to give a brief background about the existing landscape of the commercial freight segments in India. So I'll just be sharing my screen. Please tell me if you're able to see this.
Yes, Rohan, you can put it on a full screen now.
Sure, thank you. So yeah, so welcome everyone to the Tracking Road Freight's path to electrification in India. So we just want to give a brief overview of the freight sector itself, right? The logistics sector makes up to 5% of the total India's GDP, and is a major employer too. It employs more than 2.2 crores. And freight activity actually quadrupled since the turn of the century, in 2000 is expected to increase actually by 5-fold by 2050, and which would be equivalent to around 50 million vehicles on the ground. And the share of the rail freight, while the road freight has increased, the share of the rail freight has declined over this period from 89% to, you can see, it's around 34-35%, while the road freight modal split has actually increased. And also India spends around the 13% of its GDP on the logistic and logistic market, and it's ranked 35th in the World Bank's LPA also. So this is an interesting facet, since the 1950s, while rail freight was one of those major ones across India, that has significantly shifted, in the last 50-60 years. That's probably because of the stagnation of some transported coal volumes. There's a decline of average distances, and there are also reduced service leasing agreements in freight sector also, which the government is also taking onus on these days. And so we've seen, there's a decrease of up to 54%, while there is a certain, the opposite is happening in the road freight. That's because there's greater flexibility. There's option of the last mile shipping that's coming up. There's a huge growth of roads and highways networks, and each day kilometers of roads laid are also increasing. And there's been like, low trucking prices. There's been competitive pricing too. So you're seeing like, close to 48% increase in the share of the road freight. So just to give an overview of how the road freight pans out, there are greater than a crore registered vehicles or freight vehicles, and 4% of them are freight. 90% of these road freight vehicles uses diesel as a fuel, and concurrently, due to this, road freight also accounts for around 90 to 95% of the total freight emissions. This has put India in a bit of a doldrums, where there is bit of sense of energy insufficiency here, where the oil demand for the freight has actually tripled. We are actually, after China, we are the highest with regard to the utilization of energy for freight transport. And it's also estimated that it will keep on increasing in the next 30 years. And again, emissions also, due to the increasing number of freight volumes, we are projected to increase by close to 451%, up to 1,200 million tons by 2050. And that's a huge set of numbers, and that's alarming for us too. So a few in-depth stats are, when we do a comparison of the global market with regard to the United States and the European Union, we see that the average truck age in India is around 10 years, and 75% of the fleet owners are really small ones, right? And the average lead time is also around 550 kilometers, leading to like very high fuel consumption per ton, which is higher than the global US EU average. While in some aspects of average kilometers per day, India is really good, and also truck causes just around 12% of road accidents. And the other one is, the freight ownership, vehicle ownership is only 8.5% since 2020. So this is with comparison to a global average. So why is this happening? And we wanted to delve into some of the barriers for in this freight sector, and we could point out to some of the regulatory barriers for the long haul freights are the overloading, and there are certain service violations. For example, in cities like Bangalore and Mumbai, the long freights or the bigger freights cannot enter the city premises after 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock. So there are certain service violations, the poor handling, and there also, of course, the overloading factor, which makes inefficiency in the whole sector. While if they're allowed to load up to 10 tons, they load up to 12, 15 tons, which in turn leads to dilapidated roads, and relaying actually leads to more GHG emissions, because you're burning bitumen and so forth. So there's a huge intercoupling of reasons which is causing these regulatory problems. And also the governing logistics itself is inadequate. There's skewed competition. You have smaller players versus huge players who can take, the bit of a revenue hit, but then keep on going aggressively. There's certain state monopolies in certain sectors. In the north, you can see there are certain highway patterns where certain states have more number of freights, while in the south and the west and the eastern part there are low number of freight operators. There are fragmented nature of services, and the absence of incentives for people to move on to better, highly efficient vehicles. And due to there is no single window clearances for any of the processes to move. So there is some inadequacy in the government logistic itself. And then there are the regulatory barriers for moving into greener pastures. There are no certain long-term emission targets specific to freight segment. There is limited clarity as to how we would go into cleaner pastures. There are no clear transition pathways or even technology that's been spoken about widely. And again, there's unorganization in fleet ownership, and there's also inefficiency in utilization. Sometimes during the monsoons, probably from Mumbai to certain parts of Satara or something, you have 100% of grains or sugar that's going in, but while it's coming back to Mumbai, it's coming idle. There's 20-30% empty or idle. So there is inefficiency in utilization itself. So, and then there are certain policy barriers, like scrappage policy, which was instituted by the government of India in this year, is a very good step, but it's sort of not aggressive enough. The policy targets only 15 years or older, while many other countries like Germany and China does it for 10 years. So they want to remove these inefficient vehicles or more polluting vehicles off the streets, but that is not done, and hence it only limits the vehicles under consideration to 10% of the total commercial vehicles. And on top of it, India also does not have a stringent scrappage infrastructure itself. You only have few authorized scrapping centers and automotive fitness testing centers itself. And you would need to invest more than 20 crores to even set up these kind of infrastructure. So India is still in the blooming sector of a scrappage policy, and then it's bit it's not aggressive enough. And there's also a certain gap in financing. When we speak to certain operators and people to give the feedback, they say one of the transitions from BS4 jumping directly to BS6, jumping over BS5, there was a cost barrier in the sudden transition, and that cost barrier from BS4 to BS6 was substantial. And especially for first time users, like the small operators who own one or two commercial vehicles and themselves act as drivers and owners, which constitute a major position, it's very tough for them to pay these installments, and the price parity is not achieved. So I think there's certain policy barriers which can be spoken about, and which also plays a huge role in as a barrier for electrification of this sector also. So looking at this, we wanted to understand what is the differences in the total cost of ownership. And that's why we have done this total cost of ownership analysis, even the freight segment. Sorry, in the freight segment, where in our model, they have the capital expenditure component, the operational expenditure component, and certain vehicle usage details, which go into the TCL model. And this model also allows for certain sensitivity analysis to be done. If there is a variation in diesel cost and a drop in the lithium ion cost, battery cost, and then it gives out the total cost of ownership per kilometer. So last year we had we had created this sort of TCO evaluator for e2-wheelers, 3-wheelers, 4-wheelers, and big buses, to try to get the differences between the cost of operations between the electric segments and the diesel and the CNG variants. And we got really good feedback. So now what we have done is during the course of the research into the freight segment, we've also developed a total cost of operation evaluator, ownership evaluator for the freight segment. So now I think I would want to hand it over to Aparna and esteemed guests, for the launch of this specific TCO evaluator. Thanks.
Thank you, Rohan. So I'll share my screen, and I would request the link to the TCO evaluator page be shared on the chat box. I hope you can see my screen now. So the link to the TCO evaluator with the three different segments, different freight segments is now available. Requesting all of you to try the evaluator out and provide us with your feedback. With that, now I hand it back to Rohan. We will be sharing some findings from the analysis that we have done on freight vehicles.
Yeah, thank you.
Rohan,
thank you.
Just keep it really brief, and
Sure.
we'll get into the discussion.
Sure. Yeah. So, are you able to see this, please?
Yes, Rohan.
Thanks. So this is the evaluator page, and I just run through how you would be able to download the evaluator.
Rohan, I
itself.
think that part we can skip. People will figure out. They'll click on
Sure.
the icons and do. Let's just get to the results that you wanted to show.
Okay, great. So then I'll just do a small demo of the sheet itself. Are you able to see this?
Not yet, Rohan.
We are still seeing the web page.
Okay.
And it is, yeah.
Give me a second. Now?
Yes, Rohan, go ahead.
Great, thank you. So yeah, so this is the light commercial freight vehicle evaluator. So you can see, like, this dashboard which provides the results of the cost of ownership by models through the year, and there's a breakdown of component costs by percentages and total the cost itself. And we can also find the TCO by ownership over the years. Like even when you see when the electric commercial vehicles will have a parity with the diesel or the CNG variant. So you can also change. There are all the green ones here can be changed. So these are some representative numbers that we have put here during our research, and also speaking with many academicians, and also doing and I know people in the market itself. So we got all of these numbers from them. But anyone can go through it and change, and you will see, like, the change at the year 3 and year 4 and so forth. And even these numbers can be changed. The average total distance traveled per day will change, and you can see the variations of the utility and the operational efficiency of so forth. So even the terms of payments can be changed from 7 years, and also you can play around with the interest rates. And from the operational cost perspective, also the change of the staff cost from 25,000 to up and above. The fuel cost can also be played around, and try to understand, if the lithium-ion battery cost would decrease, what would be the effect of it on the electric component, and if the diesel cost were to increase again, how it would affect the total cost of ownership. And then the capacity of battery that we have taken currently for this component is a 20 kilowatt-hour battery. And we have also taken into account the number of battery replacement that will take over for the 10-year period. And yeah, so anyone can download and just go through it and play around with the numbers, try to find parity, or try to find aggressive terms of payments or interest rates, and try to understand how it will pan out. So this is a small demo. I would encourage everyone to please go to the website and download for all the 3 segments. And just finally, I just want to just give a brief idea as to how this the launch, how we have taken the differentiation between different medium and commercial frames. I'm hoping you were able to see this screen.
Yes.
Thank you. So for the light commercial vehicles, we are doing a comparison between an electric vehicle variant and different internal combustion like petrol, diesel, and CNG, where the light commercial freight segment has the gross vehicle weight is less than 2 tons and does an average distance of 100 kilometers per day with a battery pack of 20 kilowatt. While for a medium commercial freight vehicle, we have taken comparison between an electric low tonnage, which is around 7.5 tons, with a battery pack of 62.5 kilowatt hour, and done a comparison between diesel and CNG variants of high tonnage. And even the medium commercial vehicle has GVW of 16 tons and a battery pack of 200 kilowatt hour. While in the heavy commercial freight segment area, we have done a comparison between low and high tonnage of HCFV and electric HCFV versus a low high tonnage of diesel, where the low tonnage is 28 tons and high tonnage is around 55 tons. And the average distance traveled is around 300 kilometers, with the battery pack being 350 kilowatt hour for a low tonnage and 550 kilowatt hour for a high tonnage one. So we have for this, since in India, and there are not many viable models currently in the market, we have taken a bottom-up approach and developed these numbers. And so I encourage everyone also to go through it and add your own numbers, and it would be great to hear your feedback on that. So with that, I would put it back to the esteemed panelists to provide their insights, and I would ask Aparna to take over. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rohan, for giving us a brief overview of the Freight TCO Evaluator. And with that, we move on to the first session of today's first session on light commercial vehicles. And I would like to call upon our esteemed panelists for the day. Mr. Deepak, MD CEO of eTrayo, Ms. Ayushi Jain, VP Moving, Ms. Sulaja Firodia Motwani, founder and CEO, Kinetic Green Energy, Mr. Amitabh Saran, CEO, Altigreen, Mr. Sanjay Bhatia, Senior Fellow, WRI India, Dr. Praveen Kumar, Senior Manager, WRI India. And this panel will be moderated by Pawan Munukutla, Director, Electric Mobility. So over to you, Pawan.
Thank you so much, Aparna, and thank you, Rohan. Rohan, I'll also request you have sent you a message. If you could just put key findings of the TCO in the chat so that we know what was the TCO model trying to do for the three segments. I think that would be really helpful.
Sure.
But I'll start with Ayushi. We talk always about policy and regulatory barriers. So from your viewpoint, you heard what Rohan was talking about, that what are the policy and regulatory barriers. So I just wanted to hear from you that for India to actually take a pathway to electrification of the freight segment, what are the challenges that we face and what are the kind of solutions or pathways to really move towards that? And if this question is fine with all panelists, so if you can please come in on these inputs, that would be really helpful. I'll have 3 to 4 set of questions over the next 45 minutes. Thank you. Yeah, Ayushi, over to you.
Thank you so much, Pawan and WRI team, for having me here. So, of course, there are many challenges, but my perspective today will be very focused from a commercial vehicle standpoint, where because moving right now is very focused on building the technology platform from a logistics standpoint. So, from that perspective, I can break it down into a few things. One is when it comes to the vehicle, yes, it's amazing to have subsidies out there. But when it comes to the stringent testing protocols on what actually goes out to be an electric vehicle, those are somewhere lacking. Yes, there is a basic testing which is done to actually go into getting a subsidized vehicle or qualifying for a subsidized vehicle or not. But on ground reality, especially when it comes to two-wheelers, that people have had really bad experiences as drivers. And we actually sometimes have to really convince them to drive an electric vehicle. So there has to be better testing protocols at a national level to know what goes into the market. Secondly, charging infrastructure. So the reality is that commercial vehicles will be the first segment to pick up electric vehicles because from a TCO standpoint, it makes sense. But in that space, when it comes to charging infrastructure itself, right now subsidies are very sort of fragmented. Most of them are only given to government entities. There has to be a balance between government and private getting it, and also a focus on both fast and slow charging. Right now, the focus on from a regulatory perspective is only fast charging. Lastly, I would like to talk about from a DISCOM perspective. On-ground reality is, yes, most states have said that you can apply online for an electric charging point. But if you actually do and go underneath a chief engineer, basically people under the chief engineer, they basically don't have an understanding on what happens. Some states do, some states don't, but it's very localized. So them getting educated as government employees is also important to have better implementation. So I'll stop here and let the other panelists join as well.
Sulaja, if I may bring you in, I mean, you are also chair of the FICCI committee on e-mobility, and I wanted to understand from you that how real are these challenges in terms of, you are also running a company and you're also interacting with government entities. Do you see that we are currently on the right track, and what are the regulatory pushes needed for freight electrification? Because we spoke last couple of years of two-wheelers, three-wheeler segments, and now over the last 1 year, we are hearing about that, we need to electrify freight. Are we jumping too soon? It's a very in the sense that we know that, there are all the small owners. It's a very fragmented ecosystem in the whole industry. How do you think we are going to address these challenges, and how would we even move them to electrification?
Okay, well, thanks very much for having me on this wonderful panel, and congrats to WRI for taking lead on this urban freight area, which I think is actually very relevant, speaking about electrification. And as we saw, looking from the oil import bill and so many other aspects, for which it will be useful. Answering your question, I feel that electrification, of course, is now a very sustainable story, if I can use the word. So it's no longer a question whether if electric vehicles are the future, it's a question of when and how, and what is the roadmap. So that has been a great, I would say, change in, or a positive development in this sector. Um, Now, as far as the uh, path to electrification, I believe that there are some low-hanging fruit, which are going to lead the way in the short run, and which should lead the way in the short run, even when it comes to urban freight. I do believe that the last mile is the low-hanging fruit. While it would be quite ideal to also electrify the long distance urban freight, but I think that is a little bit far away because A, as Ayushi mentioned, vehicles have to be available. That number of good quality vehicles have to be available. And secondly, when you're looking at long distance, you certainly need to also have the charging infrastructure available. So anytime you speak about intercity, charging infrastructure is a must. Vehicles, TCO also is certainly more attractive on the light mobility or the smaller vehicles than on larger vehicles, given the battery sizes that are required. So I think that the low hanging fruit is electric two-wheelers and electric three-wheelers, and therefore, which are more suitable for the last mile logistics. And for so many applications such as e-commerce deliveries or even FMCG deliveries, waste management, for gas cylinder distribution, these vehicles or food delivery, the small format vehicles are quite useful. They will also do a great job of making customers aware about electric vehicles. I've seen that people are quite happy when an electric vehicle comes for delivery of groceries. There's no sound, there is no emission. It's also building the awareness, and most importantly the TCO is very attractive. More than 50% would be the saving, for a small electric vehicle like a three-wheeler, L5 electric three-wheeler, compared to a ICE vehicle, and running cost would be just 1/10. So commercially it makes sense, and from an implementation point of view, it makes sense. Therefore, I feel that the government also has taken this view over the last few years. FAME 2 is designed for what they call green mobility for the masses, with a clear focus on two-wheelers, three-wheelers, and bus, which is public transport. And I think, of course, commercial is, even in that commercial or public transport is higher priority in terms of even the subsidy or everything. So I think that's the right direction for India. What's positive is that many state governments are also now coming forward and pushing this agenda. So recently, Maharashtra launched a policy, and they are asking, mandating the e-commerce companies and other urban freight related users to dedicate themselves to a cause of at least 25% vehicles being electric by 2023. They're directing the waste management procurement to be electric vehicles. So even Delhi state government policy is pushing a positive environment or a policy framework for delivery using electric three-wheelers, where they can deliver all day vis-a-vis, only restricted hours. So I think this is the right approach, that over the next 3 years, we can have a large fleet of electric three-wheelers and two-wheelers for delivery operations, which will pave the way. In this period, I also believe that battery costs will come down further, and we will have certain options for four-wheeler LCVs and MCVs that might come in play. Charging standards will be more clear, charging infrastructure will start getting created, and therefore that the next wave would be then the longer distance urban freight. So I think this is the right way to go about it. And also addressing Ayushi's point about the vehicle quality, I do believe, Ayushi, that more and more good quality vehicles are coming on the roads. It's been a nascent industry. So I think that in the beginning, you are right, there were many import-based vehicles that were there. But now there are many vehicles with solid supply chain locally available with good specifications, especially those which are frame approved. So certainly we have to work together to create pilots. And I think startups like Movin and others are really driving this change. I don't expect the individual entrepreneur on the street today to go and buy an electric three-wheeler, because they are still quite risk averse. It is a lot of money for them to experiment. And they are more technology averse. But startups are coming forward to experiment. They see the commercial benefit. They believe in the cause of sustainability. And along with the startups and the final users like the e-commerce companies or oil and gas companies, I think we can look for a structured deployment of electric vehicles for the last mile urban freight. This, I believe, is the path which we should follow for the next couple 2-3 years, and then move to the next stage.
Thank you so much. I'll get back to Suloja. But Deepak, I have a question for you. we heard about financing, and I just wanted to ask your perspective on two fronts. One is, what do you think the electrification journey would look in 2030? And then the second part is, how complex is the financing of whether we are talking about a retrofitted commercial vehicle or a new commercial vehicle? Because I think I see some attendees also posing that question. So it seems like financing is a big challenge. Is that something you're facing, and is that something you see would the market in the years to come it will get resolved?
Yeah, so very happy to be part of this panel, and the theme is very appropriate. And the TCO evaluator is definitely a very important tool to spread awareness across various stakeholders in terms of the advantages which an EV brings in. Coming to financing, I think it's a well-known challenge across the industry, and so we need to, of course, look at it a little deeply in terms of different segment wise. So, for example, uh, we were the first ones to come out with an electric four-wheeler truck, retrofitted ACE, is what we launched in 2019. This product was deployed in various ecosystem of last mile ecosystem of e-commerce companies like Amazon, BigBasket, so on and so forth. The product was a success. It was able to, compete with the diesel counterparts in terms of range, in terms of driver experience, in terms of drivability, and more importantly, the cost economics. However, the biggest challenge was financing. And I can tell you that we went to every institution, whether it's a NBFC, it's a bank, it's a state-owned bank. We went to everybody, and we were not able to secure financing for it. So today, that product, which also is a major part in terms of scrappage policy, has come in. We firmly believe that scrappage policy alone will not be the answer to electrify. We also expect the government, from a policy standpoint, to also recognize this electrification of existing ICE vehicles and give support in terms of incentives and infrastructure support for that to happen. So coming back to the point is that we were not able to secure the financing for it in an organized way. So today that product is limited to various B2B ecosystems. So the large B2B players are today owning those assets because they're able to secure financing based on their asset books, the balance sheets. So that's one challenge. That asset, electrified ICE vehicles, retrofitted vehicles have not been yet accepted by the financial community as a financing worthy asset so far. Now coming to the three-wheelers, for example, the second segment which we operate in, we are today operational in terms of both B2B and B2C spaces. We have a dealership presence across the country, and we also are today working with various B2B logistics players in helping them deploy these vehicles. So financing is definitely a challenge. We have seen across the financing ecosystem, the challenges in terms of loan to value, the challenges in terms of the rates, the challenges in terms of even the first level of acceptability of EVs as a financing asset. And we see that, with time, there is a little more openness, but I think still majority of the institutions are waiting at the fence to enter. And those who have entered have also entered with a very, with a clear notion of putting a lot of accountability on the OEMs. And that's one challenge which, as a young OEM, we definitely face because we have spoken to a lot of financiers, and we understand the challenges from a financing standpoint. Definitely, since the market is nascent, there is a ambiguity about a terminal value. There is an ambiguity around what's going to happen if there is a default and the vehicle is taken back by the financier. While as an OEM, definitely across the EV OEMs, we have to work very closely with the financiers, but we definitely need the financiers to come forward and be a partake in this whole change. And that is where, again, we need the government to kind of provide a kind of support, facilitation in terms of the public sector banks to kind of come forward. I think that this becoming a priority aspect of lending. So I think we expect more banks to participate in this instead of just the NBFC. I think that would really open up. The other part which we firmly believe in, that Today, it's a B2B adoption which is happening. So you have these logistics players who are coming forward, and we are looking for finance for them. But the real story is going to happen when the driver owners, like you mentioned in the deck you shared, that the real owner of a three-wheeler is not a logistics player. It's going to be the driver owner, and that's the real goal for the industry to move towards. And that's where we will see large scale adoption. For that to happen, I think we need definitely the financials to come in. Today we are working on models with the financier along with the logistics player to stitch together a tripartite agreement, where the OEM, the financier, the logistics players, and the final user, which is the driver owner, comes together. So these kind of new structures are required to be built in to kind of give that security, where all the stakeholders come together and make it viable for the adoption to happen on the ground. But yeah, definitely there are lots of work to be done on that front.
Thank you, Deepak. No, I think you bring out an interesting perspective. Quickly, if I may loop in Sulaja for a quick comment, and then I'll move to my next speaker. See, financing has always been happening, right? Even for the ICE vehicles. But is that a very big challenge for the electric in the freight segment specifically? When you're talking about,
Yes,
say, three-wheeler.
sure. No, I agree with Deepak that financing has been certainly a challenge. And one of the reasons is that it is just evolution, right? I mean, today electric vehicles are only 1% of the entire auto sector. So for most of the financials, it is not important enough to really bother, if I can just use very frank words here. Since they're very busy and they're getting very good business in financing the regular vehicles. So sometimes some of the concerns that they put up about resale value or battery life, are more concerns which are there. But if they really wanted to finance EVs, then these concerns can be addressed. And so I believe that as the market would grow, of course, financing and market has to grow hand in hand. Um, but as there is a bigger buzz on EVs would get built, which is happening now, I think more and more financials would come forward to really seriously consider financing electric vehicles. So some of this, I believe, is also just their own internal policy or where they stand, and not only really genuine concerns. I'm talking from my experience in ICE vehicles, right? ICE two-wheelers, for example. Now I'm talking back in 95, 96. At that time, banks were not financing two-wheelers. Retail sector was still not tapped, and it was the local cooperative banks and the money lenders which used to finance two-wheelers. And many OEMs like us had our own financing NBFCs, which were financing vehicles through our dealers, because the bank would not go to a very small town in, whatever, Tamil Nadu or Bihar or whatever. It was not part of their business. And then in 2098, 99, the whole scene began changing when ICICI, HDFC all jumped into retail financing, small ticket lending. So from cars, they moved to two-wheelers. And from 29, 30% IRRs, the interest rates came down, the IRRs came down to 17, 18, 19%. And from OEMs looking for financiers started coming to OEMs and requesting for a seat in the showrooms and paying incentives as opposed to asking for a delinquency fund. Right? So the whole scene changed when banks jumped seriously into retail financing. Rates came down, the whole thing changed. So I think something similar should happen in EVs as there is a more buzz around EVs. And we also, as FICCI EV committee, are doing a lot of effort to reach out to banks, bring them on the same page as OEM as well. We talk to them. So I think it's a bit of that starting trouble, and not really genuine concerns with lithium-ion batteries coming in. The battery life is more than 3 years. Vehicle warranty is more than 3 years, which is equal to the loan life. So the asset is kind of guaranteed for 3 years in terms of its performance. So I think there's no reason why more electric vehicle loans should go bad anymore after we have all moved to lithium-ion vehicles. When lead acid battery, there was a concern. So I think it's something which will change. But today, definitely, financing is a constraint. But I am hopeful and I am bullish that with more NBFCs coming forward, more small banks, like you have these small banks who understand livelihood, who understand small ticket financing, like Ujjivan or Bandhan, they are looking for such opportunities because the IRRs are quite attractive in electric vehicle financing. They are just around 28, 29%. I'm hopeful that more and more people will come forward, and this issue, maybe after a couple of years, will be a non-issue. But today, we all OEMs and all EV companies have to do the job of, the groundwork of convincing, explaining, setting up pilots. Some places taking the risk of giving delinquency funds or whatever it is. So this is just the evolution, I feel. Um, and this is a
Yeah,
concern today, but hopefully it will not be tomorrow.
Ayushi, if you can just come in, you wanted to comment one.
Yes, just adding to Suleja, one thing we are trying to do at Moving Again, the larger vision here was to close that loop. Financing in the end is based on risk analysis. So closing that risk loop is important when it comes to EVs. So that's why bringing demand, telling the bank that if you give a person that EV, he or she will be able to pay that loan, because moving as a company or any logistics company will be giving minimum demand to that driver so that he or she will be able to pay that loan. So we are actually doing 10 pilots, 10 driver pilots in Bangalore right now, where the driver come owner model, the DCO model, is being implemented in Bangalore. And as we get learnings out of that, that is the only way one can scale to 1 million vehicles by 2030, which is our internal vision. But you can only scale when the driver owns the vehicles. A company cannot be that asset heavy to grow that fast.
Right.
Thank you
No,
so
so that's
much.
what I was saying before, that, we would have to do these initial work of doing pilots, setting up the, examples. And one more suggestion or one more input I have is, like, for example, at Kinetic Green also, we have brought on board a couple of financials who are now willing to lease vehicles to the logistics companies. So I think that is an interesting model also, which you can look at, you know.
Yeah.
Uh,
In fact, just to add to Polaja's point, we as E-Trio also have launched a leasing arm. So we have E-Trio Logistics, where we are leasing these vehicles out to the B2B players like a moving, to ensure that they electrify on scale, while they can keep their books asset light. And for that, we are also looking at new age NBFCs. So, I mean, we see some traction there in terms of new age NBFCs coming in and tying up for that kind of a model. So we will all have to, like Pulaja said very appropriately, that we all have to work together and create these new structures and solutions for the interim, for the next 1 or 2 years, till the market really opens up and you see a larger play of financials coming in and accepting EV as a important part of their business.
Fair enough. Let me now bring in our next speaker, Mr. Amitabh Sharan. Uh, Thank you for your patience, but it was an interesting financing discussion. So I wanted to get your comments, and I have a couple of questions for you, Amitabh. So in terms of uh, two set of questions, that you have seen Maharashtra has a buyback incentive, which is aimed at boosting the confidence of financial institutions in EV technology. What are some other similar interventions you can boost? I think we're already talking about this financing element, and do you see any other model that is going to evolve? And also, what are some of the approaches that can be taken for accelerating the penetration of EV freight segment? Amitabh? Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, and good afternoon to everyone. Wonderful points made by all the panelists. I think it makes my work a lot easier. So it's clear that transportation is a state subject. So while the government of India is doing whatever it can with respect to
Can you speak a little louder, Amitabh? Yeah.
Is this better? Can you hear me?
Yeah, much better.
Okay. Okay, great. So like I was saying, transportation is a state subject. The government of India is doing on its own part FAME subsidy, regulations with respect to, BS6 and then beyond, CAFE norms and those kinds of things. But at the end of the day, the states do have a lot more control over what happens within their own states. And I think each state government is pushing forward some kind of regime to popularize electric vehicles. Um, Delhi did it, Karnataka did it, I think Meghalaya, Gujarat, Maharashtra, each one is coming up with their own ways of trying to say how they can be a lot more attractive. I think there are scrappage norms that have been introduced in Maharashtra. I'm not, I think a lot of models with respect to that will emerge, but since they do control it at the state level, there are a few more things that can potentially be done. like we discussed on the financing side, can the government stand behind, you know, as differentiators to specific OEMs that they prefer or they like? Can they stand behind them from an FLDG perspective, from a, you know, guarantor to the loan perspective? Is there something that can be done on that side which will go a long way in in, you know, giving confidence to the financing institutions? Can governments talk about a timeline under which they will be in a position to say that, okay, X% of fleets running in their state have to be converted to electric? I think that will again push forth more things. Deepak mentioned about retrofit, about scrappage. Is there some policy or norm that can come out with respect to, you know, retrofits? They don't sound great, but I think it's a great thing, a great tool to be able to get more electric vehicles and people to get more confidence in that. So is there something that can be done on that at the state level, perhaps not at the central level, at the state level? You know, so uh, I think there are different states on the charging side. I mean, we're talking about last mile transport, we're talking about small intracity vehicles, but the moment you do a little more beyond that, you know, vehicles that can run 100, 150 kilometers can do, you know, a little bit beyond just intracity. So when you're talking about that, can there be some charging networks that are institutionalized by the government that allow vehicles to be driven to a little further out, just to give that confidence that these are vehicles, these are not like, you know, there's a inadequate comparison that is typically made with e-rickshaws. And I think it's important to you know, they did help in establishing a market. You know, there are 1.5 million of these guys on Indian roads, especially in North India, without a single advertisement, nothing else, but they're still there. They, I mean, it's generating employment. People are getting a living out of it. They did help in setting the stage, but now I think it's important to also regularize bigger vehicles, and commercial vehicles, like everyone's pointed out, are the first step. So, I mean, two-wheelers, for example, there was an announcement for you know, increasing the subsidy. Similar things could have been done even on the three-wheeler or the small commercial four-wheeler side, or for that matter, other vendors. So I think there is some amount of consistency that's required, some amount of you know, perhaps standing behind an OEM, and it could be differentiated strategy. I'm not saying that they need to stand behind every OEM out there. Based on their norms, stand behind OEM, stand behind you know, specific ones, to say that, okay, I'm going to be supporting your initiatives with respect to that. So I think, like everyone said, it's a nascent market. A lot of things are evolving. I think there's still a long way to go. There will be a lot more changes that you will start seeing. Unfortunately, the hard work will have to be done by early stage companies and startups. I'm seeing four or five of us over here. You know, all the hard work's done, but I think the needle starts moving when, you know, the so-called incumbents start showing up and we start talking about volumes. But you know, until then, we have the hard work to do, and I think we are all doing a fabulous job in terms of instilling that confidence, at least in the minds of people who are at least our customers. And organized B2B is the right way to go. I think after that, Deepak, everyone have pointed out, you know, Rishi, that there will be unorganized B2B, B2C also that will start. And I think by then there should be enough confidence in the vehicles that are already on the road.
You brought up an interesting point, Dr. Sharan. So is the onus on, and this is for all four of you, and then I'll bring in Sanjay Bhatia ji. Is the onus only on the startups for the electrification of the LCV to begin with in India? Because I almost heard like that from all of you. Dr. Sharan, why don't you quickly respond, and then I'll go across the other speakers.
It's clear because in the four speakers, they are quote unquote startups in their respective domains. Yes, so disruption always is done through startups. There is, you know, sustaining innovation, and then there's disruptive innovation. The latter will be done by startups. Sustaining innovation is something that incumbents normally do. And I'm not saying they always win in that game. I'm not saying that they should lose in the game. No, that's not the objective. I mean, Chevy Bolt, Nissan Leaf, very, very good vehicles, but it took a Tesla to prove that, you know, good electric vehicles can be made sustainably in fact, the best vehicle ever built. So yes, to a certain extent, to a very large extent, the burden of this proof does lie with startups.
Suloja, and then Ayushi.
So I think that as Dr. Saran mentioned, this is EV is a disruption. It's not an incremental technology, and I think it's also about mindsets, right? I mean, when you are selling millions of vehicles, then you are heavily invested in the technology, whether it's your machinery, whether it's your people, your dealers, your own mindset, and therefore it's not always easy to completely look outside the box and do something else totally different. But startups come in with fresh thinking. They come with dedicated, business models. They come with the passion, and therefore, they are able to bring something out which is quite exciting. And I would say that, like Kinetic Green actually is a little bit of both, right? I mean, Kinetic Green by itself is a startup in the EV space, but we do come in with the OEM experience and the pedigree of having scaled up national businesses. But we still started Kinetic Green as a new company, and with a completely new team, with this exact thought process that we need to bring in new mindsets and build products ground up, without any legacy, shackles to be chaining, this new baby. So I think all the companies in EV space are doing a wonderful job, and I wish all of them all the best. And I think when these times of disruption, new heroes are born. So I think there will be many new heroes that this revolution will throw up. So looking forward to what happens in the coming years.
So will the startups get into will be acquired, or will they move towards their journey as OEMs?
I think it could be a little bit of everything. I think, and EV is not the only sector, but there are so many other sectors where you have seen consolidation, strategic partnerships that could happen. Some EVs could, some startups could scale up on their own with investors. Some could get, partner with existing OEMs. I think there'll be a lot more action that we will see in the coming years.
Ayushi?
I think both of them said it. That's what's going to happen. And I, on a personal level, I feel the larger leaderships of these big OEMs, it's come down to psychological acceptance that it is happening. So it'll take them a few years, but it will happen. So again, startups will create that disruptions, move the system, and then it'll get accelerated, of course. And it'll be a balance between startups and them.
Deepak, anything you want to add?
I think everything has been said. A new world takes a new imagination. So I think that can only happen if you have hardly a baggage of the past. So I think that's where the new players, whether it is the new OEMs, whether it is the logistics players, even in logistics also, you would see a lot of EV focused new players are coming up. The conventional logistics players are still behind, still waiting. So I think that's the reality. But now we are seeing the big ones come in. So that's a good sign, because the whole ecosystem will evolve further, and we'll see more strides. Yeah.
Let me now bring Sanjay Bhatia. He's been with Tata Motors, and now he's for last almost over 35 years, and now he's with WRI. Thank you, Sanjay ji. So over the next 10-15 minutes that's left in the session, I thought we'll just get into some of the technical aspects also. So I wanted to ask you that how big is this issue of gap between the GVW tonnage versus load carrying capacity on the economic viability of EVs, specifically for this light commercial freight?
Yes, Pawan, thanks for calling me for this session. This GVW versus payload and the battery range, this has been the biggest concern of EVs, whether it's a bus or it's a small commercial vehicle. So if you look at small commercial vehicles, especially, if you try and increase the range to 150 to 200 kilometers, you will need a battery size which will actually weigh more than 200, 300 kgs. And the moment you increase the battery size, your payload comes down. So the bigger challenge is, how do you increase the payload? Right now, most of the ICE vehicles have actually 600, 700 kgs of payload. Now with EVs, this reduces. And this actually affects the TCO also. So this is an area of concern, and Of course, there are other areas also, but this is one of the major areas of concern, and maybe Deepak can actually put in some how they are managing through retrofitment, because this would be a bigger challenge there.
Deepak, you want to come in?
Yeah, so I think Sanjay has rightly pointed out that the GVW versus the payload is a challenge. So while we have got a product certified at a payload which is the original payload of the ACE, however, the expectation of the customers in terms of what a diesel ACE can carry, and typically vehicles in India, commercial vehicles that in India are built for over usage, and that's the reality of the ICE environment, which is where the EVs struggle. We have seen our vehicles put under a payload of almost 1.5 tons, and if you go beyond that, that's like a breakage point. So we have seen that the expectation of the Indian consumer, the customer, the logistics operators, is very extraordinary in terms of what a vehicle payload is and what they can carry in it. So while our vehicle can carry what it is certified at easily, and beyond that also, but it definitely cannot match what a typical diesel vehicle can do currently.
So I have something to say here, can I?
Yeah, of course, please.
So I believe that um, each vehicle is designed to do something, right? Specifically, and while diesel vehicles in India are built for high torque and abuse in terms of overloading, they are not fuel efficient. Their running cost is very high. Their maintenance cost is very high. Whereas EVs are designed to be very cost efficient. Ground up EV is also designed with lightweighting in mind to give more efficiency, to maximize the use of the mileage from the battery that is being used. So therefore, I believe that these two are different animals. So I feel that a ground up designed electric vehicle will always give therefore the best result when it comes to optimization of the payload and the efficiency or the cost effectiveness. If you do a retrofit, then you're taking the heavy weight of diesel designed for a different kind of usage pattern, and you're adding very expensive fuel, which is battery. So then you're going to end up getting penalized. I think when it comes to customers, they have to also understand this, right? I mean, if you're buying an electric vehicle for your urban freight, you're going to have huge savings on a per kilometer basis. You're going to also be sustainable and have a green vehicle with no emission and no sound. And therefore, this vehicle may not be designed for the abuse or very very much extra overloading. The way diesel vehicles are used. But in diesel vehicle, you are going to spend much more per kilometer. You're going to spend 4-5 rupees plus maintenance, where you're going to spend only 40-50 paisa, very low maintenance. So they have to also understand, and this is again, that's why the corporate customers or the more evolved, intelligent customers are buying EVs first, because they understand the benefits of using the EV, the savings that they're going to get per kilometer, and the green theme that EVs bring, and they therefore are going to be more disciplined on not overloading the vehicles. And then slowly this way of using an electric vehicle for freight is going to evolve, where the savings are going to outnumber the benefits of the overloading, and then the usage behavior of customers will change. So certain segments like last mile delivery, again I said, e-commerce, waste management, these are going to be early adopters. Like we see for waste management, an EV is so much better than a diesel vehicle. A diesel vehicle, you end up spending 4-5 rupees, plus there is high maintenance, plus there is the issue of chori, of the fuel by the contractor. Use an electric vehicle, you have huge savings, and for waste management, the weight that they carry is very less. So the kachra, whatever, the garbage is bulky, but it's not heavy. An electric vehicle is much better to do that operation. You need vehicles which move slow. You need vehicles which can go to people's homes at 4-5 in the morning. So there's no sound, there is no emission. So these are the benefits of using these vehicles for waste management. Also, like for example, we have given 3,000 vehicles in Andhra Pradesh in villages. So one vehicle per village. In the villages, they have electricity, but there is no diesel fuel pump nearby. But you can still mechanize your waste management because you can easily charge that vehicle at the Gram Panchayat office or whatever. So I think therefore the EV use will start with certain select segments, and then it will lead to a change in the usage behavior, customer expectations, and then slowly the mainstream buyers will not emphasize on overloading, but will focus on things like efficiency and low cost of running, and therefore still will make more money using an EV by doing an extra trip rather than overloading the vehicle. This is what I believe, how it will happen. But the overloading customers will not buy EVs today. They are not going to be the early adopters, is what I believe.
Anyone has any comments, Sanjay ji or Deepak?
So, can I come in?
Yeah, Doctor.
Yeah, so I think it's a valuable thoughts here, but this is not to say that there will always be a difference. I strongly believe that there will always be a difference between India and the emerging markets versus the rest of the world. I think we are known for a certain kind of price performance sensitivity. There's a reason why these guys overload. Right? It's not because it's fun driving a vehicle that can't climb a flyover, or where the mileage is dropping down just because you're carrying a heavier load. But they're doing it because that's what life is about. So I think EVs have been around in our country since 2001. The reason why they were not able to make a sustainable dent is because they were not able to compete in price and performance with conventional vehicles. So whatever a conventional vehicle can do, either a new use case is created, and there I completely agree with Sulaja that the early adopters might be the ones with use cases where conventional vehicles are not required. Perfectly all right, no disagreement on that. But for any large scale adoption, we cannot first start by saying, hey, you guys need to change. You need to stop doing this. You need to stop doing this. I think that's where you need to build the right kind of vehicles with the right kind of ruggedness. And I always say the same thing again and again: price and performance. If you're conscious about these two and you can deliver a vehicle that can do both those things at the same time, you've got a winning combination. And it has to compete. It has to be apples and apples compete with that. Otherwise, large scale adoption will not happen. You will have early adopters, of course, the curve will be, but it'll be a slow moving curve. I think that's the only difference that I would like to bring.
I just want to add here that what Amitabh said is bang on. In fact, in three-wheelers, what we are seeing is a adoption because of the use case emerging so clearly in the favor of the EVs. In the four-wheelers, we have a four-wheeler which has been on the roads for 1.5 years now. The TCOs there are competitive. What is required, I think, what our experience says in the last 2 years of working with the logistics industry is the fact that you need to spend a lot of time going beyond the skin of the OEM to work very closely with your clients, with your first adopters, with the people who have an intent, but they don't understand what an EV can really deliver. While they understand the broader objective of cost savings, environment, other things, but you need to educate their drivers, the operators on the ground. So it just can't be a typical OEM. You give the vehicle and your job is done. That's not how an EV world works. And I'm sure others on the panel also will agree that there's a lot of work on the ground to be done by the OEMs who are creating the products. They have to go to the ground, do driver training, certification, operator understanding, how to look at the entire ecosystem, what benefits are translated, should be quantified and understood by people. So that's where the behaviors will change, because typically somebody has been overloading for all these years. Now they get a new vehicle, they would continue, their mindset is similar. So you need to change and demonstrate to them that without doing this, they can still do better and much better, because EVs can really change their lives, both in terms of being noise free, pollution free, and great amount of savings they can deliver.
I have a quick question before we wrap up this session. So how many EVs do you, especially in the LCV segments, how many do you think will come up in the next 2 to 3 years? Any estimate in terms of percentage or numbers? Just curious.
You mean number of OEMs, number of vehicles on the road?
Vehicles. Like how many EVs will we start seeing?
You mean that
including two-wheelers?
Let's keep 3-wheeler onwards. So we're not talking about passenger segment, only the commercial segment.
Okay.
I'm turning you all into researchers to get some answers for our research. So are you sure, Sulajja? Yeah, but say 2025. Yeah, Sulajja.
I'm extremely bullish on use of electric three-wheelers for the last mile urban freight. And I think that over the next 2 to 3 years, certainly we will see more than 25% of vehicles going electric. In fact, today, Piaggio, which is one of our competitors, but one of the leading companies in three-wheelers, so I'm quoting them, has announced it's in the media that they expect that in 3 months, 25% of their sale will come from electric three-wheelers. So this is a hardcore diesel three-wheeler manufacturer. So I think things are moving faster than we are imagining, and I'm very bullish that in the next 2 to 3 years we will make great progress. And I don't see any reason why at least 25% vehicles in urban freight will not be electric. And I'm also still saying this is a conservative number because I think it will go from B2B and then to B2C. So the B2C customer will lag a little bit. I think my co-panelists made very good remarks about people's usage pattern, behavior takes time to change, etc. Some of these things are unknown. Sometimes things, just change very quickly. But if we were to still take a fairly conservative, way forward, I think I'm very bullish that with startups like Movin and Delivery and others driving the way forward, and with good products like Kinetic, Super Jumbo, and so many others which are here today on the panel coming in, I think we'll see much faster adoption in the coming 2 to 3 years. I'm very bullish.
Same, I would 100% agree. 25% being very conservative, around 55 to 60% on the three-wheeler commercial front, for sure. And two-wheeler, it can go up to about 80% by 2030, 2032, around.
Yeah, absolutely agree.
It's a huge difference. It is not a 20-25% difference. It's 10% the running cost, and with the news policies and the subsidies and the falling battery prices, once you achieve this apple to orange price parity, means EV with battery equals ICE vehicle without fuel, then even the sticker shock goes away. So it makes the case even stronger. So it's just the issues of financing, having enough products, having the ecosystem evolve, which we are all working towards. And I'm very bullish that these things are beginning to fall in place.
Yeah, numbers will be large enough. I think numbers will be easily. I think Ayushi mentioned 50%, Sulajja mentioned 25%. I'm an OEM, I go with the higher number. Nothing against you, Sulajja, but we need a lot more vehicles on the road. And three-wheelers per se, definitely. I am, especially on logistics, I see no reason why there should be, really, at this point, they're all intracity. I don't see cargo three-wheelers going intercity. I can't see a reason why they should not be bullish about, a conversion 50% minimum as far as I'm concerned in three-wheelers. Small commercial four-wheelers, I would imagine that a large percentage of that also, by large, I mean 20-25% will definitely convert for small commercial vehicles.
Deepak?
Yeah, so
I think even if you can distinguish, I think we're talking about SCV versus LCV. So
I understood. I think three-wheelers versus the SCVs, four-wheelers. So three-wheelers, I think completely with the panel. I think the numbers can change, but I think the sign is very clear. We also expect a 50% market to convert, and we see no reasons really for the customers to hold on to the EV wave in this segment. And mind you, the cargo segment numbers in the country are in three-wheelers are not too high as compared to the passenger segment. So cargo three-wheeler is not the biggest segment we're talking about it, but the overall segment accounts for, I think, 1.5 lakh units a year. And Piaggio dominates there. And it's very encouraging to see Piaggio launching and coming in. But this segment, I think, should get completely, EV-fied, whatever is the word. And the four-wheelers is a much larger segment. Four-wheelers is a much larger segment with a much larger use case. And it needs more enablement. In fact, the TCOs also needs improvement. We haven't seen a product which really can tip the scales in terms of the TCO. So TCO charging infrastructure, but once the four-wheeler comes in, the volumes are much larger. It's a much larger industry. And the 25% of that industry would be much larger or equivalent to the three-wheeler numbers we are talking about.
Thank you so much. Can I request all the panelists from the next one also to turn on before the first panel members start leaving? So Jasjit, Erica, Praveen, Aparna, you can all turn on your videos. Erica, are you there with us?
Yes.
Yeah, so if you can turn on your video. So thank you, Sulaja, Ayushi, Dr. Sharan, Deepak, and Sanjay for the interesting discussion. And I think we are talking about SCV, LCV, MCV, all kinds of segments, and it's only a beginning. And the whole point was to really steer this conversation in an open ecosystem, because I know we have been having conversations, but I think something in public domain. So I really want to thank each of you for bringing your perspective and joining us for the session. You are welcome to continue and be there for the next session, which my colleague Praveen will be moderating on MCV and HCV segments. So with that, I will hand it over back to Aparna. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Pawan, and thank you all the panelists who joined us for the first session. I mean, a lot of panelists joined us even, with very short notice as well. And I think we will now move on to our second panel, which is on medium and heavy commercial vehicles. So for the panel, we have experts from the industry. We have Mr. Raghavendra Mysore, co-founder Move Tech, Mr. Kalrav Joshi, Business Development Manager, Blackbuck, Mr. Jaspreet Sethi, CEO, TCI Logistics, Ms. Rashi Gupta, MD, Vision Mechatronics, Ms. Erica Myers, Acting Global Director, Electric Mobility at WRI. And this session will be moderated by Dr. Praveen Kumar, who is Senior Manager at Electric Mobility at WRI. Over to you, Praveen.
Thank you, Aparna. Good afternoon to everybody. So I welcome our all esteemed panelists for this second session about electrification of medium and heavy vehicle segment. And before we start our discussion, I would like to request all the participants to share their views, suggestions, and question related to the electrification of freight segment in India in chat box. And at the end, we'll try to get response from our experts for the selected questions, and other questions, suggestions will be uploading on our event page. So welcome once again, and let me start with Mr. Jasjit, who is from TCI, CEO of TCI, and so we are seeing relatively less discussion and action around the electrification of freight segment in medium and heavy vehicle segment, especially in the medium and heavy vehicle segment. So how you see the future of EVs in this medium and heavy vehicle segment? And the related question is that, is there any regulatory or policy barrier who you think is there, along with the other general barriers like high upfront cost and range anxiety, issue of charging infrastructure, financing, etc.?
I think that's a great question. Typically when we look at any sector, we do not look at it in just black and white of ICE versus electric. We see it in terms of alternate fuels first. And we also look at it in terms of hybrids. So it could also be a plug-in hybrid. It could also be a hybrid is charged by the diesel or the petrol engine as well. Let's look at alternate fuel like LNG as well. So typically what we have seen in the country, whenever anything has happened related to environmental friendly forms of fuel, it has been regulatory. Look at the CNG came in not because the auto companies wanted it. It was the Supreme Court order which made them do it. So we have unfortunately not had any kind of an R&D emanating from the OEMs themselves saying that, hey, this is our plan for the future. They come in as a knee-jerk reaction to a government order. Now, maybe it is that they already have investments in this, and that's why the startups are the first ones to start with. Let's park that for a moment. everybody has a short and medium long-term plan. And maybe I think it is a chicken egg story. We from the sector do want those vehicles. The people who can make it are probably not sure about the demand as well. And there has not been a dipstick survey done till date about and by any of these big manufacturers to find out the appetite and interest in alternate fuels. If you see the Auto Expo held biannually, about 8 years ago, we saw an LNG truck yet to be seen in the market. Last Auto Expo in Noida, we saw electric LCVs by one OEM yet to be seen in the market. So typically, when we talk about to the press in terms of what looks good, we talk about environmental friendly and stuff, but we don't really walk the talk. So in where we are concerned, be it intercity, intracity, we believe that after CNG, LNG should have come in by now, for sure. We also believe that we could look at plug-in hybrids as well, which would help us solve the question of middle mile and the short mile as well. We also believe that as freight becomes more competitive, you need to look at higher capacity vehicles. And you cannot just make the same platform by adding batteries to it. It has to be on a fresh platform, ground up, which is, let's say, for 2030, 2040 as well, and not for, just as a stopgap arrangement. In terms of regulatory, we have a Central Motor Vehicle Act, a CMVR. So many things can be done centrally as well. You saw unorganized people coming in the rickshaw and three-wheeler trade and taking over the market, and regulations followed later on, not before them. Similarly, if you look at the current regime, the axle weights have already gone up in 2019. We've already had a new policy of CMVR come in 20 beginning. So in terms of regulatory, I think that is not a bottleneck. I've yet to see any application given by the OEM majors asking the government of India, hey, we want to do this, can I do it? No one's approached us. We are the largest company in the country. No one's approached us that we want to make 50 vehicles. Will you buy them? The answer is yes, we will buy them because we believe that's the future of mobility. We believe that TCO is only one part of it also. Let me just spend a moment here on TCO as well. When we compare ICE with electric, we just talk about the engine. But when we talk about Tesla, it's a whole ecosystem. So in terms of the electronics in the vehicle, what electric vehicle can do is much more. A simple thing like an adaptive cruise, which is not in any vehicle. It could be very easy for electric vehicle to come in. Things like collision control systems. So when you give a new vehicle, you don't do it as a Me Too approach. You do it with something which are added on. And that makes it a game changer. I think I should pause here and wait for you and others to react.
Thank you, Mr. Jasjeet. So I'll just go over to all the experts and take their comment on the specific topic, and then I'll come back to you. I have a few more questions for you related to charging infra. So now let me go to Mr. Kalrav. And what is your views about the key barriers in accelerating the electrification in this medium and heavy vehicle segment? And what are some key intervention you can think of can help in accelerating this EV adoption in this particular segment?
Thank you, Praveen. Thank you, WRI, for this opportunity. As already mentioned earlier, that the traction in this segment particularly is low. So for that, we need to understand the entire industry. So this is not like electric bus segment or a three-wheeler segment. A three-wheeler particularly applies, within city limits or somewhere it can get charging infrastructure access. Whereas when we talk about HCV segment, the trucks generally are owned by fleet owners, and those fleet owners are not directly connected with the freight providers. So they don't get the business directly, and that is through brokers. And there is a huge gap in this. And if I am suppose a trucker or a driver, and I drive from say Delhi to Mumbai with some load, I don't know where I will go from Mumbai further. I have no visibility on that until I reach that particular location. So in such a dynamic market, without a good policy on charging infrastructure and battery swapping infrastructure, it would be very tough to convince fleet owners to have a vehicle which is almost more than twice the capital of this existing IC vehicles. So this is the first challenge. If we talk about government interventions, what government can do is start using their wayside amenities on national highways and national expressways, and have some battery swapping standardization and infrastructure there on those highways. And then maybe some OEM need to come up, and as Jasjeet ji also mentioned, that we haven't seen any OEM going to the government and tell them that we want to do this. It has happened in bus segment, it has happened in two-wheeler, three-wheeler car segment, but an OEM needs to take this up, though it is a capital intensive and financing will be a huge barrier here. But there need to be more players to play around this with government.
Thank you, Mr. Kalrav. While doing research for this TCO during the development of TCO evaluator, we also observed there is a lack of viable EV models in medium and heavy vehicle segment. And even we forced to use the bottom-up approach and do the interaction with the experts from the industry to develop this evaluator. So now I'll go to Mr. Raghavendra and now I'll ask how big is this challenge and what are the possible way out in your opinion for this?
I would say that when we look at, specifically heavy vehicle segment that we are looking at, any assumption that we may want to make or generalize it will not serve the purpose of the actual deployment that we want to see. The reason I say that is, when we look at heavy vehicle segment, there are multiple segments within that, where the operational environment is completely different from one for the other, which is where we believe, some of these regional haul segments where you have, let's say, highly controlled environment where you can deploy and then possibly, make use of the asset much, for much longer kilometers and longer duration, is where TCO is already highly attractive. Going purely with, EVs, electric powertrains. Now the question comes on the other, on the charging infrastructure or battery swapping that some of our other panelists have already highlighted, where I believe when we look at, operational conditions, what we see on a regional haul is completely different from what we might want to see on a heavy, intercity kind of applications. So on an intercity, on a heavy haulage, I don't see why we should go even with a road vehicle at all, where railways, electrified railways already are much better, proposition purely from a technical standpoint of view. So which is where I see, that how do we scale the models where we can start deploying heavy duty vehicles within controlled environments like ports or, within a port industry is early adopter ecosystem, and then see how we can scale to a larger, kilometer haulage or larger environments and then scale from there. Yeah. So the point I wanted to make is, let's distinguish between the different operating environments and see how we can scale within each of these operating environments.
Yeah, thank you, Raghavendra. Globally, we have seen a lot of discussion around decarbonization of freight segment. And also, when we were doing search for the EV models in this segment, we saw a lot of examples in global market. So I'll now go to Erica and ask that, keeping in mind the current situation in India in this segment, are there any suggestion you can provide to accelerate the electrification of or decarbonization of this medium and heavy vehicle segment in India?
Absolutely. So first I want to start out and just say that even though trucks only represent about 9% of global population, they represent about 17% of the distance traveled and 39% of the greenhouse gas emissions emitted in the transportation sector. So this is obviously a really high target for our opportunities to reduce GHG emissions globally. But unfortunately, we're heading in the wrong direction. According to the Bloomberg New Energy Finance, for medium commercial vehicle and heavy commercial vehicle, only 12% of vehicle purchases will be zero emission vehicles by 2030, compared to 31% by 2030 for light commercial. So we are roughly half of that forecast, which also is significantly lower than in every other duty cycle. So we have a lot of work to do to convince these commercial operators to purchase zero emission vehicles and also reduce some of the barriers which we've already discussed on this panel. In my personal opinion, I think it comes down to two major issues. The first is charging, which we've all kind of highlighted extensively so far. But I think one of the things we haven't really discussed is how we can work closely with the utilities to reduce confusion for those commercial operators on how much it's actually going to cost to put in the infrastructure. So for example, what is the energy service upgrade fee going to be? Usually you don't actually know that cost until after you submit a request for that interconnection. And then you're already pretty far down the line in terms of your charging infrastructure assessment. So that can be an unknown cost that's also a surprise for a lot of commercial operators. The second is, what is my utility bill actually going to be? Is another one that sometimes those hidden fees like demand charges are really difficult to predict. And a lot of it comes down to how can we try to better manage our charge management systems so that we can reduce some of those demand charges. So I think that's something, I've worked extensively in my prior job with utilities to try to figure out how can we make this less scary, more predictable, and in a way that everyone benefits from the transition. Second, I think it comes down to funding, right? So these are definitely more expensive. Thankfully, WRI India has developed this TCO calculator, which really does help provide some visibility to fleet operators. But I think, when we think about funding from a government level, consistency is key. So the lack of year-over-year government funding for freight fleets has been a challenge in a lot of countries. There's not that predictability for the manufacturing sector. And so they're not making massive investments in scaling up. So the lack of product is another challenge. Second, a lot of this funding requires complex requirements. So for example, scrappage requirements, which means that the previous internal combustion engine that they owned has to be, forcibly removed from the vehicle population. They can't sell it and get some funding from that. So scrappage has been a challenge. Also, there's just onerous reporting requirements to the government, lots of grant writing requirements for the OEMs the fleet operators that they may not have expertise to do. So, and then also, specific model years that are required to participate in, or maybe, limited number of vehicle options. So those are all challenges as it relates to government funding. Also, we need to keep in mind that because change is scary for a lot of fleet operators, they want to see, possibly funding that actually makes that EV counterpart even cheaper than the diesel alternative, because you have to be able to show like all this is going to be worth it for my fleet. So, if I'm going to spend all this money on grant writing and reporting, I actually need to be able to show like my boss that I'm actually going to save more money rather than stay at the same level as a diesel. So these are all things we need to think about as we're designing government policies and programs.
Thank you, Erica. I will come back to you on the question on the funding, because that is one of the very important aspect that need a serious attention. But we'll just move on to the battery. So we know that battery is one of the critical component in EVs, and all major challenges, whether it is high upfront cost, range anxiety, issue related to slow or fast charging, weight of the vehicle is associated with this battery. And one of the concern what we discussed in the last session about the gap in the gross vehicle weight and the payload capacity in EVs. So if you are sizing battery for long range, basically the payload capacity will come down. And if we reduce battery pack size, then range will become the issue. So now I'll go to Dr. Rashi. She is dealing with the battery, and she's having, I'm sure she'll be having the answer of this question. So what is your opinion on a small battery pack with fast charging versus large battery packs to support the long range? and also role of renewables in supporting charging infrastructure on highways. Dr. Rashi.
Thank you. Nice questions. Now, see, what happens is, I think we need to have optimization between a long range vehicle and a smaller battery pack. So when you can create a balance between the two, I think you can come to something which is very optimal. Second point is, see, what happens is the technology is ever growing. And we need more innovation in terms of the battery pack design, in terms of thermal management, to ensure that we deliver the committed number of cycles and the committed discharge that we're talking of. I mean, the energy that we're talking of, to actually cover that range that we are looking at. And another thing, the challenge that we all have seen is the lab results of the EVs are much rosier than they're actually on road. So the committed range is on the lab result is much, much better than what the consumer will actually get on road. Yes, the fleet owner are having issues with the batteries, and they're having issues with, the entire ecosystem of charging. So something that you can do is you can include more renewables on the highways, which you rightly pointed out. Yes, that makes sense, because if you include renewables, you actually reduce the load on the grid, which helps, the overall cost of having a charging infrastructure comes down. Like as Erica mentioned, that surprise element comes when you go to the DISCOM when you have applied to the DISCOM and they gives you a new surprise, okay, this much cost will come more. It will increase your cost to add, if you want to add the infrastructure out there. That is one thing. Second is, having a technologically robust system in terms of your battery pack design, in terms of your powertrain, and having reduction on imported resources, which is not easy today. I admit that it is not easy today, but we all need to focus and work towards it, because once we achieve that indigenization on these parameters, things will change. Like, I'll tell you what, there are two types of, I'm going to do one of the very basic points here. What kind of a battery management system are you going to use? In your battery packs really, really impact a lot on your range, on your efficiency of the battery pack, on your entire range that you will get out of the mileage that you will get. I mean, here it is, the kilometers per charge is what you will get. So that makes a difference. I mean, there are small parameters which they have to consider. Second, I feel that there is no alignment between the OEMs. The OEMs also need to align that this segment is an upcoming sector which can actually change the scenario of the transportation that we all are aiming at. We can do a lot of decarbonization here. So these are certain things that if we focus on will change the scenario. And if we add more, we of course definitely come down with the cost of per unit charging also. Also, when you said that the battery makes a lot of cost, it is the major component of your EV. We can also look into battery as a service. Instead of having battery as a capital investment onto the vehicle, you can have battery as a service. When you look at battery as a service model, it really helps relieve the pressure from the OEMs, number one. Of course, intercompatibility issues and battery swapping and these things are certain things on technical front that we need to take care. But if we can look at battery as a service, 40% cost is straight out, which makes it more affordable. And then when you're paying it as a service, you have used your pay. It reduces the burden on the fleet, on the end user also. So if we can evaluate these points, certainly there would be a lot of change and the shift that we can see in the transportation.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Rashi. Raghavendra, just now, Dr. Rashi mentioned about this battery as a service. So I would like to get your opinion that how do you see the battery swapping as a viable option in freight segment? Because in last session, we discussed about the gap in the GVW and the payload capacity. So what role you see the battery swapping in this freight segment?
As Rashi has already highlighted, battery as a service is definitely very attractive, because when we talk about heavy duty vehicles, we are talking about much larger battery sizes than what you would see typically on an LCV or the passenger cars or two-wheelers. And those upfront costs are, harder for the fleet operators to afford. So we definitely have to look at least the startups like ours who are looking to cater to these, industries. We have to look at battery as service model to begin with, where we can amortize the cost of the, the initial capex over the life of the, asset utilization. Going back to the previous point that we were discussing, when we, desegregate, this segment from a larger intercity application to, let's say, pure regional haul, which itself is a very huge market. We are talking about, segment where, ports or, allied industries already utilize over 50,000 heavy duty vehicles, over, 40-ton plus cargo carrying, capacity vehicles. And that itself is a huge opportunity for us as a nation to electrify and start beginning, from that segment, and then scale to a larger, distance. So once we do that, we don't have to look at battery capacities that need to cater to 200-kilometer range. We can even do with the battery size that caters to 40 kilometers and then keep swapping it. And then because though the kilometer, run during 24-hour cycle is much larger, we're still constrained within the smaller geographical location. And that, helps, where you can do with the smaller battery and then keep swapping it, and then at least keep running the asset, and then, reduce the costs per kilometer per ton basis, and then scale, to larger distance going forward. But yes, as Rashi was highlighting, battery as a service model is definitely more attractive to look at least in these regional haul applications.
Yeah, thank you, Raghavendra. So there is no doubt, and we require an efficient network of charging infrastructure to accelerate this electrification of road transport. So, and generally freight vehicles on highway, they move during the night. So my question to Mr. Jasjeet, that how we can create an efficient network of charging infrastructure to ensure high level of operational efficiency of EVs in this segment, and also your comment on the battery swapping option for this segment. And one more question I will add before you start, that because daytime we usually see the movement of passenger vehicles, and nighttime more freight vehicles. So how feasible and the opportunity for RUC in integrating in the charging infrastructure?
Thank you. That's a great question, especially about the impression that freight vehicles move at night. So this could be for a couple of reasons. First, in the cities and towns, mostly there is a no entry during the peak hours. So typically from 7 in the morning till 11 or 12, and the evening from 5 to 9 is a period of no entry for commercial vehicles, for passengers. So the small window for them in the afternoon, maybe 12 to 4 or 5, and the whole night is the option for them. That could be one reason why we feel that. On the highways, however, now, the highways have changed dramatically over the previous years. And we do a lot of these route surveys as well. So on the main arteries, which are the national trunk roads, which are 4-lane, you find the movement happens for the day. It is not that only happens during the night itself. And people prefer drive in the day. Actually, as a company, we at TCI don't allow vehicles to ride between 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. That's a period we don't allow our trucks to ply. The reason behind that is that many highways are not well lit. So you might find a tractor trolley or somebody else coming on the wrong way on a highway, or somebody who is intoxicated, and generally it is the fault of the bigger vehicle. So we would get into trouble for that. So on the highways, unless there's no entry issue, we don't drive at night. We only drive in the daytimes as well. So that is not the issue. But so where do we charge? So typically the truck is long time for it to get loaded and then to get unloaded as well. So if you've got charging points available at the point of loading, which is the docks, and point of unloading or the location where they are coming as a parking yard, it could be quite easy for them to get charged. Now, should it be a swapping or should it be a chargeable thing? It will depend on the integration. The GVW is a major concern. If you look at Tesla, the battery is the chassis. That is what's holding the vehicle together. Now, if you were to have a separate chassis and have batteries hanging on the side and then swapping them, you also would have very huge brackets. So some of the gross vehicle weight, the payload would go in that because of the gross vehicle weight minus payload would be a smaller amount. So it may not work for them. What's important is that if I also have electric vehicle personally as well. So the charging is in two types. One is AC charging, where you get 7.5 to 8 kilowatts of charge per hour. So it's a 50 kV battery. It'll take 6 to 8 hours to charge. The other is a DC charging, which is a quick and fast charge, where the same charge you get in an hour or 2 hours as well. So if the infrastructure is available of charging both from DC to DC and as well as from overnight or at the docks, then probably this charging is done much faster than we used to feel it to be. Yeah, unlike a diesel vehicle, in 15 minutes you get a full tank. That will not happen. So if you are trying to run a very long distance, let's say a Delhi Bangalore, today we run in our vehicles in about 40 to 50 hours. That we can't do electric vehicle because it would require charging for longer periods. But let's take baby steps on that. First, we look at city and the middle miles. There we have infra at the loading and unloading points in the parking areas. We also have the fast chargers. So that should not be a problem, but it's very important to design the vehicles ground up as an electric vehicle, not as a compromise. Then we will be somewhere cutting into the payload of the vehicle. How that answers your question.
Thank you. So one of the question, what issue was we saw in the last session also was around this funding and the financing thing. So what is your comment or suggestion to address this issue of funding and financing for this EVs in freight segment?
Personally, I think it's not an issue at all. Because the funding is not asset based anymore. It is funding is based on the profile of the customer. So there used to be a time where you are funding the asset, but today all the finance companies look at the profile of that customer, and if he passes the requisite test, the loan is given to him with asset as a collateral. So here you have a profile based funding along with a collateral as asset. I don't see any issue at all in terms of funding at all. I think the issue with regard to funding will probably be lesser because the maintenance cost and the running costs are far lower in an EV than in a ICE. So typically you are putting the investment upfront here, wherein that investment comes in later. So the running operating cost is far lower in the case of an electric vehicle compared to the cost of a ICE. So I don't see any issue in funding.
But when we interacted with few of the banks and the other expert in the financing sector, so their major concern was around the related with this technology. They were not that confident that how it will behave, what will be life, whether especially with the battery. So I'll go to Mr. Kalrao and ask what is his opinion and what he thinks about this.
So I feel that yeah, upfront cost of the vehicle will face financing issues, but as already we discussed that disintegrating the battery from the vehicle can help us reducing the cost and in turn match the life cycle of an IC engine vehicle. So say you replace the fuel cost with a battery swapping, it still will be less than the cost of diesel because the cost of electricity is hardly 10 times the diesel if you consider per kilometer basis, and then add some service charge because cost of ownership is taken by some player or the other, maybe an OEM or maybe it can be through government. So as we see in India, fuel stations are owned by government. So it was a government's push for that. And similarly, you need a government's push for this segment specifically. Also, to run this segment, as mentioned by Mr. Raghuvendra earlier, that port movements and such movements can be the initial set of movements that this industry can look for. There are certain sectors like specialized containers or specialized vehicles which ply on a particular lane. So they ply on a to and fro lane. Specifically, I come from oil industry, so I'll quote this example here. So an oil tanker will go from a refinery or a storage area, tanker area, to a particular retail outlet and come back to that area. And this is more or less 200-kilometer distance. So a vehicle with 200-kilometer of range can be charged overnight at a loading location, because loading generally happens in a day time, and then go to apply to a nearest retail outlet, unload there. And this is a to and fro movement, and the freight is paid for to and fro movement, and not only one-sided movement. So these are the sectors where financing would be easier. Banks and would be happy to invest in these sectors, because at the end logistics cost will be coming down in such cases.
Okay, so quick comment from Erica, and Dr. Rashi also wants to say something. So Erica, you can give your comment on this.
Yeah, I would agree, Kaurav, that I don't think that we're in a place where it's easy to finance medium and heavy duty freight vehicles yet. And part of that is because it's just not necessarily proven technology so much that it is easily financeable. Also, there's also trade-offs, right? So we haven't talked about payload trade-offs yet. There is a certain problem for weight, payload, and space constraints, especially along the frame rails. And so we have to keep in mind that the people that are making these decisions, the fleet operators, have to weigh off these costs. If they can't move as much freight, then they can't necessarily use the vehicle in the same way that they would normally. And so that means they have to have more vehicles. So it isn't necessarily something that's just a super easy, like one-for-one trade-off. And I think we need to also be mindful, the cost of putting in the charging infrastructure, very wide, varying costs, and also that energy consumption. So, maybe it's not a government voucher or a grant, but maybe even creating something like a carbon market that would allow that fleet operator to offset their fuel costs for the energy, as participating in something like a low carbon fuel standard, like we have in California or the other parts of the US, Canada, and Europe. And so those are other kind of creative ways that don't require any government spending, but that provide the right pricing signals to the industry and help create that certainty for investors.
Thanks, Erica. Dr. Rashi, any quick comment?
Yes, one comment I had to make here based on the government's push that everyone is talking about. Yes, government is doing their bit on the path of standardization. Also, there is a lot of effort being made on battery swapping, coming to something uniform, at least to begin with, at least with the two-wheeler and three-wheeler segment to begin with. And then after, once this is out in public and implemented, things will move on to the higher segments where we have the bigger batteries coming into picture. And there's also a lot of effort being made on reuse and recycling. So very shortly, you would see a lot of work which is being done behind the scenes right now will be out into the public domain, wherein you can see a lot of standardization and uniformity in terms of battery swapping, in terms of charging infrastructure also. And this would also help in faster adoption. And once on a larger scale, but on a smaller segment, on a lower segment, if we can implement this well, we can definitely replicate the similar model for the bigger vehicles also.
Thank you, Dr. Rashi. So we also have Mr. Madhav Pai, Executive Director, WRI India Ross Center. So Madhav, I would like to have your quick comment on this this electrification of the road freight segment in India.
Thanks, Praveen. No, it was sorry I could only join a little late. No, it has been a fascinating conversation. Great to hear your perspectives. I've met some of you in the past also, so it was great to have your participation. Yeah, I think I'll not get into specific comments. I think we've looked at freight sector before in the context of cities, and some of the challenges that are there, and I think given sort of the challenges of organization of the freight sector in India, and how large they are. I think electrification provides a huge opportunity to see if we can actually use it as a vehicle to also think about reorganizing the sector as a whole. So it's both, it's electrification of freight, but it is also organization of freight using electrification as an entry point. I think if we use that perspective, actually, I think we might be able to be a lot more successful in this. And so that's the main broad point I'd like to make. And of course, 2-3 wheelers, I think, is a huge opportunity. I personally have always believed that the 3-wheeler should become India's biggest export. I think we have leadership on that vehicle type. I mean, there is a lot of deep experience on using it. It is an extremely fit for purpose vehicle, especially when it comes to urban freight. And I think so that's something definitely to think about as well. So yeah, I mean, those are just some broad points I'll make. Thank you everyone for your contributions, but I'll hand it back to Praveen to.
Thank you, Madhav, for sharing your view and joining despite your busy schedule. So once again, I just thank all our esteemed panelists for sharing your expert views on this topic. And I will hand over to Aparna now. Over to Aparna. Over to you, Aparna.
Thank you, Praveen, and thank you for those insights on medium and heavy commercial vehicles. And also, it was interesting to understand the various innovative business models that are, that are being considered for making electric freight vehicles viable. So I would like to thank each and every one of you to have joined this discussions today. From taking time off from your busy schedules on behalf of WRI. And I would like to thank all the attendees of this panel discussion. Thank you for all your questions and your suggestions. And I would request you all to take a look at the TCO evaluators and share your feedback on that. Thank you all.